I never thought one moment could change the direction of my life. But it did. I was just walking home from the market that morning, like I always did, the heat from the African sun warming my back. The same dirt path. The same familiar smell of roasted corn and dusty air. But as I rounded the corner near the old baobab tree, the one we all passed by without thinking, I saw her. She sat beneath it like she'd always belonged there, like the tree and I had some kind of silent understanding. Her name was Aiya. I didn't know that then, but I remember how the sunlight hit her face just right. Her eyes, they held something I can't fully explain. Not sadness. Not joy either. Something in between, something deep, like she'd seen storms but chose peace anyway. She couldn't walk. I saw that right away. But that wasn't the thing that caught me. It was her smile, soft, honest, full of life. She looked up and smiled like she'd known me for years. And just like that, my heart did this little stumble in my chest. It wasn't pity. No, not even close. It was more like awe. Like I was seeing strength for the first time, not the loud kind, but the kind that speaks in stillness. That moment, under that tree, I saw something in her that felt bigger than me. Bigger than this whole village. And I just knew, I'd be seeing her again. The days slipped by like pages in a well-worn book, and before I even realized it, visiting Aiya had become the part of my day I looked forward to the most. No matter what else was going on, I always found my way to her little hut near the baobab. Just seeing her smile, even for a moment, made everything else fade away. I'd bring her small gifts, nothing fancy. A bright strip of cloth I picked up in the market, a handful of sweet oranges when they were in season, or sometimes just a tiny bird I'd carved from wood. But deep down, I knew it wasn't the gifts that mattered most to her. It was me showing up. It was the time, the care, the attention. And I could see the way she started to change. Her laughter returned, first in small bursts, like sunlight breaking through clouds, then more often, echoing through her home like a song that had long been forgotten. Her eyes began to light up when she spoke of tomorrow, of the places she dreamed of visiting, of things she wanted to learn. But even in those moments of joy, there was something underneath, a shadow that flickered behind her gaze. She never said what it was, but I felt it. Something she carried, quietly, like a secret too heavy for words. Then, one afternoon, I was helping her tidy up when I stumbled across an old photograph tucked in a dusty drawer. It was a man, tall, proud, dressed in fine city clothes. His face was stern, eyes sharp like they were carved from stone. He looked like someone important and dangerous. I didn't ask her about it. Not then. I just tucked the photo back in its place. But it stayed with me, buzzing in the back of my mind like a warning. Over time, I started noticing how tense she'd get when certain things came up, talk of money, or when someone mentioned family. Her shoulders would tighten, her voice would drop just a little. She tried to hide it, but I saw it all. One night, the village gathered around a fire, the stars wide and bright above us. Aiya began to tell a story from her childhood, one I hadn't heard before. Her voice was calm, steady, but there was something else under the surface. A quiet ache. She spoke of life before the accident, before everything changed. I listened carefully, watching her face, knowing there was more she wasn't saying. That night, I made a silent promise, whatever lay ahead, I'd protect her. No matter what. Our bond kept growing, like roots twisting together beneath the earth. I started helping her stretch her legs, slowly, gently. I'd lift her carefully, guide her through tiny movements. It wasn't easy. There were tears, there was pain. Some days she nearly gave up. But other days we saw something shift. Then came that morning I'll never forget. The sunlight poured through her little window just right, warming the clay floor. She took a deep breath, set her jaw, and placed her foot down. I held her hands, my heart pounding like a drum. And then she took a step. Wobbly, shaky, but real. And just like that, the world tilted. She laughed and cried at the same time. So did I. Word spread fast. The village celebrated like someone had won a battle. And in a way, she had. But with each step forward, shadows followed close behind. One evening, as we sat by her small fire, Aiya went quiet. Her eyes locked on the flames for a long time. Then she whispered, "I've never told anyone what really happened." The story came out slowly. She spoke of a car crash. But the way she talked about it, disjointed, hesitant, I knew something was off. Her hands gripped her knees, knuckles pale. I remembered the photo. That cold man in the expensive clothes. Who was he really? What had he done? The next day, I came back with a gift, a bracelet I'd made from village colors. Bright red and yellow, woven with care. She smiled, but I could see something was weighing on her. And that's when she told me the truth. Her father wasn't just some distant memory. He was alive. A powerful businessman in the city. But not the kind with warmth in his heart. He had cared more about his reputation than his daughter. The accident, it wasn't just an accident. It was tied to the lies he'd buried. He'd hidden everything, left her broken, physically and emotionally, just to protect himself. I sat there, trying to stay calm, but inside me, something snapped. She'd suffered in silence for years. And now, knowing the truth, we weren't just walking toward her healing. We were stepping into a fight for something bigger, justice. But peace wouldn't come easy. A few nights later, I was heading home, the air thick with dust and heat, when I noticed something strange. Two men I didn't recognize lingered near the old market. One of them called out to me, his voice low and rough. He told me to stop digging into things that weren't my business. Told me to keep quiet about Aiya's past. The threat was soft, but the meaning behind it hit hard. I kept walking, fist clenched, heart racing. Back in her hut, Aiya sat in silence, her fingers trembling. I could tell she was scared, not just for herself, but for me. But she looked at me with a different kind of strength that night. And I knew, deep down, there was no going back. We had crossed the line. The truth was out. And we weren't done yet. Just when the weight of everything felt like it might crush us, someone unexpected showed up in our village, a man named Kofi. He didn't come with loud words or city arrogance. No. He came with dusty boots, a worn satchel over his shoulder, and a notebook that looked like it had seen war. Kofi was a traveling journalist, the kind who chased stories most people were too afraid to tell. He'd heard whispers about Aiya and what she'd been through, and something about it had pulled him in. He introduced himself kindly, sat under the baobab like he belonged there, and told us he wanted to help. Said he believed stories like Aiya's needed to be heard, not just in our village, but beyond. But I'll be honest, I didn't trust him at first. Not fully. Aiya didn't either. We'd seen too many people come with smiles and leave with pieces of us missing. Why now? I asked him one evening. He shrugged and said, because truth needs light. And some lights have to travel. Aiya and I stayed up that night, talking softly, voices wrapped in candlelight. We knew telling our story would stir a storm, but the chance to speak out, to fight with more than just whispers, it was too important to ignore. So, together, we began planning. Quietly. Carefully. Knowing that once the truth was out, nothing would ever be the same again. Soon, our village was buzzing, not with joy, but with nervous glances and hushed words. The rumors had started to spread, growing legs and running wild. I could feel eyes following me when I walked. Friends became quiet. Strangers stared too long. Then came the man in the suit. He showed up one hot afternoon, shoes too clean for our dusty roads. Said he was from the city, an emissary, whatever that meant. He smiled too much, but it never touched his eyes. He offered me a gesture of goodwill, a thick envelope I didn't touch. Promised things would be taken care of if we just stopped talking. I stared at him for a long moment before I said anything. Then I looked him dead in the eye and said, "We're not selling our truth. Not today. Not ever." He didn't smile after that. That night, Aiya and I sat under the stars, her hand wrapped tight in mine. She whispered things she hadn't dared to say before, dreams of walking beyond the village, of seeing oceans, of building a life where fear didn't live in every corner. We didn't speak about the threats. We didn't need to. Our silence was stronger than any warning. But then it got worse. A few days later, I found Aiya's home trashed. Windows smashed. Her things thrown like garbage. I stood in that wreckage, fist clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. I wanted to fight. Wanted to yell. But I knew if I lost control, we'd lose everything. So instead, I gathered the elders. I stood before them, voice steady, and laid out the truth about her father, about the threats, about everything. Some didn't believe me. Some wanted to stay out of it. But others started to nod. They knew something had always been off. The silence had lasted too long. Through it all, Aiya stood taller than ever. She didn't cry. Didn't crumble. The girl I met under that tree had become a woman of fire. Her journey from silence to strength, it was the kind of courage that left people speechless. But healing is never a straight path. Though her body had grown stronger, her past still haunted her nights. She'd wake up shaking sometimes, caught in memories she couldn't quite place. I tried to help, but some ghosts don't listen to love. Then one evening, I got a message from an old friend in the city. He said he had something for me. Something big. Proof. Real evidence about Aiya's father, business records, hidden accounts, files that showed the accident wasn't an accident at all. It had been covered up to protect his name, his empire. But my friend also warned me, exposing this could bring danger, real danger. Not just rumors or threats, but something worse. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the flickering candlelight, asking myself one question: was I ready to risk everything for the truth? The answer came in the morning, when I saw Aiya smiling through the pain, her body tired but her soul alive. Yes. I'd risk it all. For her. For us. Then, just when I thought the tension couldn't twist any tighter, another visitor showed up. A woman. She came late, a knock on my door that cut through the quiet like thunder. She wore a scarf pulled low and had eyes sharp as glass. "My name is Nia," she whispered. "I used to work with your enemy." She laid it all out. Said there was a plan to discredit Aiya, forge papers, spin lies so believable they'd stain her forever. But Nia was tired of it all. Said she'd help us if we promised to protect her identity. I looked her in the eye and said, "You have my word." With Nia's help, Kofi and I struck back. We used every scrap of truth we had, exposing the fake documents, recording the threats, and revealing how deep the corruption ran. Kofi's story hit the city like a drumbeat, loud and undeniable. People started paying attention. But the cost was real. Aiya's health began to falter again. The pressure wore her down. Her legs ached. The progress we'd made started to slip. One night, as she lay beside the fire, I sat next to her and held her hand. "You're stronger than they'll ever be," I whispered. And I meant it. This wasn't just about justice anymore. This was about her life. Her freedom. Her right to stand, to speak, to live without fear. We weren't backing down. Not now. Not ever. Some nights are so heavy, you can feel the fear sitting on your chest before your eyes even open. That was one of those nights. I woke up to the sound of shattering glass. At first, I thought it was a dream, but then the scream followed, short, sharp, and real. I ran outside and saw people gathering near Aiya's hut. My heart dropped. Her window had been smashed again, and this time, the wall had been marked with a crude red symbol, ugly, angry, and dripping with hatred. It wasn't just vandalism anymore. It was a message. They wanted us to stop. To be afraid. To give up. But when I reached her, she was standing there, barefoot in the dirt, arms wrapped around herself, but not backing down. Her lips trembled, but her eyes burned with defiance. I moved to pull her close, but she spoke first. "They want me silent," she whispered, her voice barely above the wind, "but my story is louder than their threats." I swallowed hard. My arms found her shoulders, steadying us both. That night, we didn't sleep. We sat by the fire, watching it flicker and spit, feeling every second stretch like a lifetime. I knew then, this wasn't just a fight to be had anymore. It had become a battle for our dignity. For our souls. But danger has a way of hiding behind familiar faces. Not long after, I noticed something strange about one of my closest friends, Kamso. He started avoiding me, saying little things that didn't sit right. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe he was scared, maybe overwhelmed. But then I heard him, behind the palm hut, whispering to a man in a clean city suit, the kind that doesn't belong in our village unless it brings trouble. The next day, someone told me Kamso had been spreading stories, that Aiya was bringing shame to the village, that she was cursed, dangerous even. I confronted him. Right there near the market path. He laughed. "You think truth matters here," he spat. "You're risking everything for a girl who should have stayed silent." The betrayal hit harder than any threat. Kamso, my friend since childhood. Bought and sold like a sack of yams. Paid off by Aiya's father's men just to twist the air around us. That night, I sat with Aiya and told her everything. Her eyes didn't water. Her hands didn't shake. Instead, she took a deep breath and said, "Good. Now we know how far his shadow really reaches." And that changed something in me. We weren't just fighting his power anymore. We were fighting the lies that grew like weeds in the cracks of our home. But even in darkness, light finds its way. One afternoon, something beautiful happened. A small group of women, older, younger, mothers, daughters, gathered in the square. They came without fanfare, no speeches, no drums. Just quiet voices and linked hands. They had heard Aiya's story. They'd seen her stand tall when it would have been easier to fold. And now, they stood with her. They began organizing, sharing their own pain, their own stories of being silenced. Stories of injustice that had been buried under shame for too long. Aiya had lit a fire inside them, and now they carried it forward. I watched from the edge of the gathering, holding Aiya's hand. For the first time in weeks, I saw her smile reach her eyes. Real, full, and free. Later that week, I walked with her through the village square. It was just a short stroll, her steps slow, my arm steady under hers. But what we saw made both our chests swell. People paused. They didn't stare like before. They smiled. Some offered nods. A few whispered blessings under their breath. The same place where we once felt exposed, judged, now felt like a garden beginning to bloom again. It was no longer just our story. It was everyone's. The fight wasn't just ours. It belonged to every woman who had been silenced. Every boy who had been told to shut up. Every villager who had ever swallowed injustice just to keep the peace. And standing there with her, in that sun-drenched square, I realized something else. We were no longer afraid of the father, the shadows, or even the pain. We had become something bigger than them. We were hope. We were fire. We were truth, and the truth had found its legs. When Kofi returned from the city, we didn't know whether to feel hope or dread. He carried an envelope, thick and heavy in his hands, the kind of envelope that felt more dangerous than comforting. Inside, a mountain of documents, full of names, signatures, bank transfers, and shadows of betrayal. We spread them out across the floor of my hut. Each page felt like peeling back a layer of rot from a food that looked perfect on the outside. But something didn't sit right. Aiya noticed it first. These documents, the dates don't match. And then I saw it too, signatures that didn't look quite right, amounts that changed between copies. Some of the documents were fake. Planted. Set up to trap us. That was when I truly understood we weren't fighting just one man. We were staring down an entire system, stitched together with lies and sewn with threats. We burned the fakes. Kept the real ones hidden like fire under wet leaves, ready but controlled. But as we gathered our truth, fear came clawing back. I came home one night to find the door wide open. Not kicked in. Just opened, like a snake had slithered through. My mattress was torn. The small box where I kept my mother's beads was gone. On the wall, someone had used charcoal to write 3 words. Stop. Or disappear. I didn't say a word when I saw it. Just stood there, listening to the wind outside. And for the first time in weeks, I felt cold. The elders came that evening. Their faces long, voices tight with warning. They urged me to let it go. It's not your battle, one of them whispered. You'll bring fire to our doorstep. But how could I stop now? Aiya was already knee-deep in this. And I had already given her my heart. Then, the call came. Aiya was sitting on the porch, watching the stars, when her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She answered, and I saw the color drain from her face. A man's voice, low, calm, evil, told her to walk away or they would finish what the accident started. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just handed me the phone and whispered, "We've come too far to turn back now." And that's when Kofi dropped the final card on the table. A plan. Risky, desperate, but maybe the only shot we had left. We'd secretly record a meeting between Aiya's father and his men. Capture their voices, their plans, their own mouths admitting what they had done. Aiya hesitated. Not out of fear, but out of pain. Am I strong enough to hear him speak about me like that? She asked. I told her she didn't have to be strong alone. We weighed the risks. Trusted Kofi. Packed lightly. Left under moonlight. The city was louder than I remembered. Brighter too, but not with warmth. With warning. Kofi led us to the meeting spot, a small office tucked above a downtown bar. We slipped in early, hid the device, stayed quiet. Then they came. Aiya's father. 2 of his business partners. A lawyer who smelled like expensive cologne and corruption. They laughed. They talked about Aiya like she was a smudge on a window, inconvenient and messy. They joked about the accident. How she should have stayed quiet. They spoke of judges, bribes, how to bury stories before they became headlines. And the whole time, my hand gripped that recording device like a lifeline. Then, something shifted. A sound behind us. A shadow moved. A guard spotted us. And the chase began. We ran. Down tight alleys slick with city grease. Through narrow market paths, past honking taxis and confused vendors. My lungs burned. My legs ached. But I didn't let go of Aiya's hand. We escaped. Barely. But we escaped. When we returned to the village, we looked like we'd crawled out of war, bruised, dirty, eyes wide and hollow. But we had the tape. We gave it to journalists Kofi trusted, not the kind on billboards, but the ones who lived for truth, even when it came with danger. The story exploded. Headlines. Radio shows. Secret recordings. Aiya's father's name fell from grace like a bird shot from the sky. But truth has a price. The backlash was swift. Some allies vanished. Others turned cold. Our enemies became desperate. And Aiya, she fell sick again. Her legs gave out. Her body shook with fatigue. But she never once said she regretted it. One evening, as I sat beside her bed, she reached for my hand and whispered, "Even if I never walk again, we walk through fire together." I wanted to cry. Instead, I kissed her forehead and said, "You didn't just walk. You carried all of us." The days that followed were quiet. Too quiet. We knew it wasn't over. Justice is loud, but revenge is patient. Still, we had won a battle no one believed we could. The village began to change. People who once whispered behind our backs now came forward, thanking us, offering support, sharing their own truths. And Aiya. She wasn't the girl beneath the baobab tree anymore. She was a flame that refused to be snuffed out. As for me, I don't know what the future holds. But I know this. I'd do it all again. For her. For us. For the story that deserved to be told. When the story hit the news, it spread like wildfire. People all across the region, even far beyond our little village, were shocked. Outraged. They demanded answers, demanded justice. It was no longer just about Aiya. It was about every woman, every child, every forgotten soul who had been stepped on by the powerful and told to stay quiet. The pressure on the government became too much to ignore. After months of cover-ups and denial, they had no choice but to act. Aiya's father, the man who once towered over boardrooms and hid behind lawyers, was finally arrested. The charges were serious: corruption, endangerment, abuse of power, and negligence. And still, we didn't dance in the streets. Not yet. Because we knew this wasn't the end. It was just a crack in the wall. But it was a start. I'll never forget the day I stood in court, her back straight, voice calm, and eyes locked on the truth. She didn't flinch. Didn't stammer. She told her story with grace and fire. Every word she said felt like a victory, not just for her, but for all of us who had carried silence like a burden. The courtroom went still when she spoke. And I stood right behind her the whole time, knowing I'd never seen anyone braver. After the trial, the fear slowly began to fade. The threats that once hung in the air like smoke started to vanish, day by day. The village, once wrapped in whispers and suspicion, started to breathe again. You could feel it, in the way neighbors talked, in the way kids played again near the stream. And Aiya, she began to heal. Her legs grew stronger. Her steps more certain. The limb that once reminded her of pain began to look like something else, like pride. We spent long afternoons walking through the open fields, sunlight painting the world gold. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we just walked in silence, feeling the earth beneath our feet. That silence, it used to hurt. Now, it felt like peace. But healing wasn't just in the legs or lungs or muscles. It was in the heart. In trust. In the slow rebuilding of what the past had broken, forgiveness came in waves. Not just for the people who hurt her, but for the pieces of herself I had buried just to survive. And one day, she turned to me and said, "Let's build something. Not a house. Not a shrine. A school. A place where kids can dream bigger than their last meal," she said. "Where they can speak, think, and grow without fear." That school became our mission. We named it The Roots of Hope. And the village answered. Mothers brought cloth and thread. Fathers brought bricks. Young ones painted walls with their hands and laughter. We built not just a building, but a future, one brick at a time, laid with stories, with purpose, with love. And slowly, the scars faded into something else, reminders of what had been, yes, but also proof of how far we'd come. One evening, near sunset, we sat under the baobab tree. The same tree where it all began, where she once sat still and quiet, and I first saw something in her eyes that changed my life. We sat there, our hands intertwined, the wind soft in the grass around us. I looked at her and said, "I never wanted to be famous, Aiya. I just wanted the world to hear our story." She smiled, her eyes shining in the orange light. "Well, Mbala, our story showed them that love and persistence can move mountains." And maybe she was right. We don't know what tomorrow holds. We still have work to do. Fights to fight. Kids to teach. Wounds to heal. But one thing I do know. We'll face it together. Whatever comes. Side by side.